Sometimes I get questions from first-time leaders who want to know how can they get a team to listen to them? Or how can they quickly establish themselves as the leader of the team if they are new to leading that team? The answer, in one aspect, boils down to influence. If being able to influence as a first-time leader is important to you, then make sure you watch this video to the very end. There's going to be a lot of information that I will be sharing, and at least you will be able to take one action that can help you increase your influence. In this video, we're going to talk about 3 areas. First, what is influence and why is leadership mostly about influence? Next, where does influence come from? Finally, what are the ways that you can grow your influence? Let's get started, shall we? This video is based off Principle 24, Step Forward and Lead for Success. Principle 24 is part of the 30 principles of first-time leadership, that combination of traits that allow you to be a successful first-time leader. To get your hands on this document called the 30 Principles of First-Time Leadership, there's a link in the description below, just click on it. What is influence and why is leadership about influence? First, let's start off by defining what influence is. Influence, simply put, is the ability to have an effect or change on others in terms of their development, their behavior, or even their direction in an indirect way. The key word here is indirect. When you manage others, you are directing them, you're instructing them on what needs to be done. They follow you whether they like it or not because you are the formally appointed leader. Management works really well in a very well-structured hierarchy, a well-structured organization where you are the formally appointed leader and others must follow you. Leadership is more about enabling and empowering people to decide whether they want to follow you. You can show the vision, you can share the ideas, but in the end of the day, people have to decide whether they want to follow you or not. When they choose to follow you, it means that you have influence, and that makes you a leader. What are the forms of influence and where do they come from? I want to make it clear that influence is a result, it's not a goal. Influence comes from the result of you being able to bring others to their success through your words, actions, and decisions. Successful leaders understand that there are different forms of influence. The 6 forms of influence are drawn from the idea that there are different sources of authority. I've simply looked at this from a different lens. Formal influence is directly tied to the position that you hold in your organization. The higher up in the organization you are, the more influence you have. The more directly related the work that is done to your position, the more influence you will have as well. Some may not be formally appointed leaders of others, but they have expertise that make them influential in the industry. These people who have industry knowledge are able to influence because of the expertise that they hold. When it comes to morally ambiguous situations that may lead to difficult actions or decisions that need to be taken, some choose to take the moral high ground. When you take the moral high ground, it gives you influence because leaders who do that understand that the vast majority of us, when given a choice, will choose to do the right thing. When you are involved in a situation, you have more influence over that situation than someone who is not. For example, if you choose to get involved in organizing your business's annual dinner and dance, then clearly you have more influence over where that dinner and dance event is going to be held or the food that people are going to eat than someone who is not involved. Some may have access to critical resources such as capital, labor, technology, etc. I think the best example that I can give would be secretaries to senior leaders. Secretaries normally have a lot of influence because they can restrict access to people of power and influence. Some may be in a position to be able to reward or punish, and that is a form of influence. For example, in some organizations, the human resource department will put certain restrictions in terms of the pay rise that employees can receive, and line managers have to adopt those guidelines. One thing that you need to take note is that the 6 forms of influence lend themselves depending on the circumstances involved. For example, someone with expert influence is more likely to be influential in situations that call upon their expertise, but may not have much influence when it comes to situations involving reward or punishment. Successful leaders are well aware of the circumstances involved, and they draw their influence from the different forms accordingly. Another point that I want to make is that you still need the strength of your relationship as a necessary foundation to be able to influence others. The 6 forms of influence are a multiplier based on the strength of the relationship that you have. And so successful leaders make it a point to build that personal connection because, like I said, you still need relationships with the people that you're trying to influence before you can influence successfully, and then they make use of the relevant form of influence to be successful. What are the ways that you can grow your influence? Your ability to influence draws from a bank account where trust is its currency. So when you try to influence others, what you're really doing is spending trust. Now, how much trust you have in this trust bank account is really up for you to sense and to determine. But what I would say is this: depending on the circumstances involved and the forms of influence that you have access to, the cost of trust spent is going to vary. Let me give you an example. If you are a formally appointed leader and you're trying to influence your team members, the cost of trust spent in influencing your team members is going to be pretty low. When you're trying to influence others, what happens is that you are spending trust that is accumulated in your trust bank account. This trust is then on loan to the people that you're trying to influence. When you are able to bring these people to success, more trust is earned. And what happens is that you gain back the trust that is loaned to them plus a bonus. So the accumulated trust in your bank account increases. The next time you want to bring these people to their success, when you want to influence them again, it becomes easier to do so because they know that you can bring them to success. So it becomes cheaper in terms of the amount of trust that you need to spend to influence that same group of people. The reverse is true. When you fail to bring people to their success, the trust that is on loan with them is lost. You also incur a penalty, which means that the next time you try to influence that same group of people, it's going to cost you more trust. Very few people are willing to stake their success with someone who has not been able to prove that they can deliver results. Many of us first-time leaders, me included when I was very early in my first-time leadership journey, we focus too much on trying to influence others when instead we should be building trust. Because trust is needed in order to influence others. And so the more trust you have, the easier it is to influence others. Just how exactly do we build trust? I'm going to share with you 7 ways. Relationships. Remember earlier I talked about the 6 forms of influence. Relationships with the people that you're trying to influence always form that necessary foundation. Clearly, it's a lot easier to be influenced by those that you know well. And that's why you need to put in the time and effort to build those personal connections with your team and with the people that you're trying to influence. Have you ever wondered why when you work with the right mentor or coach, that we're able to very quickly build trust with them and be influenced by them at the same time? It's because the mentor or coach is contributing their opinions, their experiences, and their perspectives to help us get to our success sooner and in a much easier manner. And when we listen to them and take action and we do find success, we find it so much easier to trust them. Simply put, contributing to the success of others breeds trust. Taking ownership is more than just getting the job done and producing the desired results consistently. Taking ownership is really about being seen by others as reliable. When you are a reliable leader, others are willing to put their success into your hands because they feel safe with you. When the leader puts in the time and effort to develop others, trust is built. But this isn't something that happens immediately, it happens over time. So a leader starts off by putting in a bit of time and effort to develop a team member. The team member reciprocates by producing the desired results. And then the team leader puts in a bit more time and effort to further develop that team member, so on and so forth. Eventually, trust is developed over time. When you get involved in a situation, whether that's a project team, task force, or additional assignments, you have more influence over that situation than someone who is not. At the same time, when you get involved in a situation, you may also develop expertise and have access to resources which gives you more influence. When you do better than others in a very similar situation, whether that's a project team, a task force, or additional assignments, you have more influence. Think about it. A high performer in a team is more likely to be trusted and will more likely have more influence than an average or low performer in the same team. When you take charge of a situation, you are immediately accessing different forms of influence. For one thing, when you take charge of a situation, it puts you in the equivalent of formally leading others. The next thing is, by taking charge of a situation, you're building up your knowledge, and so you're becoming an expert in that particular situation. Third, by taking charge of a situation, you may also gain access to resources and perhaps even have the ability to reward or punish when necessary. Taking charge also gives you multiple ways to build relationships. For one thing, when you take charge, you have to build relationships because you need to get to know the people that you're working with. When you take charge, you also have to contribute to their success. Taking charge puts you in a position where you have to develop others in order to ensure that they are successful. And usually, when you take charge of a situation, you are taking ownership. I hope you got value out of this video so far. And if you did, really appreciate if you hit that like button. Helps me out with the YouTube algorithm. At the same time, if you have not subscribed to First Time Leadership, do click on that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you know when new videos come out to help you with your first time leadership journey. To sum up, I talked about 3 things today when it comes to being able to influence as a first time leader. First, influence is about having an effect or a change in others in terms of their behavior, their direction, or their development in an indirect way, with the keyword being indirect. When you lead, what you're trying to do is you're trying to influence people by empowering them and enabling them to go in the direction or to do the things that you want them to do. And they do it willingly. When they choose to follow you, that makes you a leader. Next, I share about the 6 forms of influence which are based off the different sources of authority. Depending on the circumstances involved, the different sources of influence will become available to you. Different forms of influence will be more relevant. Finally, as a first-time leader, you need to spend more time building trust rather than focusing on influencing others. Because in order to influence others, you need trust. And I shared 7 ways in which you can build trust. I'm going to end off with this. The currency of influence is trust. The more trust you have, the better you are able to influence. If I had known about the 6 forms of influence and the 7 ways of building trust, which I didn't, and I only learned about these through my work in first-time leadership, I would have progressed so much further in my corporate career. Now, I'm confident that if you were to take at least one action from either the 6 forms of influence or the 7 ways of building trust, that over the long run, you will be able to progress in your corporate career much further. I'm sure of it. So that's pretty much it, everyone. I hope that you have taken at least one thing away from this video to help you build your influence and become a more influential first-time leader. In any case, my name is Dan Lee from First Time Leadership. I look forward to speaking with you soon.